The topic assigned to me this afternoon is how to apply research in educational planning. I decided, however, to introduce a particular methodology in research for educational planning using the theory of change. This theory is widely used in many international uh, projects, international programs, usually implemented by the USA and the European Union. But many of the educational institutions are also using this theory in trying to evaluate their programs. So the theory of change is basically a systematic and cumulative study of the links between activities, outcomes, and context. Systematic and cumulative study of the links between activities, outcomes, and context. So basically, the theory of change is a theory based approach to planning, implementing, or evaluating change. So when we implement projects in our schools, whether it's a school-based management project or a nutrition program or the program that we have now, which is a modular approach to teaching, we have to consider the experiences that we have encountered in implementing the project so that we can improve them as we go along. So there are many approaches to the study of the theory of change. You have the deductive model, wherein in this approach, theories of change are developed from existing research. So usually there are existing researches, existing theories that certain programs are based upon. Okay, so sometimes we use those theoretical bases in trying to evaluate our own experiences and see if some of the theories are applicable to our experiences. That is the deductive model. Example would be the behavior of change theory, which states that behavior starts from knowledge, attitudes, and practices. When we apply that theory, for instance, in our school, then we could look at how our the knowledge inputs that we give to our students that could change their attitudes and could change their practices as well. That is the deductive model. Another approach to the theory of change is the inductive model. The inductive approach attempts to build a theory from the facts. This is from specific to general. So the different factual information that we have gathered, we put them together, and from this information that we get, the patterns, the relationships that we were able to establish, then we start to establish a theoretical basis or a theoretical explanation for our project. Next is the mental model. This privileges the knowledge and experience of stakeholders who have their own ideas. In other words, in the mental model, we look at what the stakeholders would say about the particular program. And from their own perspectives, from their own experiences, we try to build knowledge. We try to ask them what would be the best explanation to a certain experience in a certain project, in a project that we are implementing. And lastly, we have the collaborative model, which states that the theory of change is co created between the implementers and the participants. So together, They share their experiences, uh, they, they share their experiences of the program so that you would be able to more or less understand why it works or why it does not work. So basically, there are four modalities in the study of uh, in the theory of change. You have the deductive model from general to specific. You have the inductive model, which is from the specific to general. You have the mental model, which is based on the experiences of the stakeholders and their ideas about the program. And lastly, you have the collaborative model. These four models could be used when we do research in educational settings. So, these are some of the questions that you probably will be asking when you do theory of change evaluation of your program. You might ask the question, what is the situation you face right now? What is the situation after the program has been implemented for a year? What is the situation? Did the students' basic skills in reading increase or decrease? Did we did we improve the weight of our children under our feeding program? Did we address the problem of dropouts from our IPs and Muslim students? What's the situation right now? So you ask that particular question. The second is, what are the underlying causes? What are the causes of the situation? Why are we here right now? What led us to this particular situation? So there could be many answers, many explanations for this. But eventually you come up with a general cause. You come up with a general explanation why the situation happens like that. Then what needs to be changed in the long term? And how do you want things to be different? These are things that you would be asking. Why is it that the feeding program is not working? Why is it that the dropout rates are still high? Why do we have lower passing rates in the national examination? Why is it that the principal continues to use traditional methods in management? Why is it that learning in the modular setup has not changed or has not improved? So, what needs to be changed in the long term? And how do you want things to be different? How will these changes be made? If you are doing a certain program right now and you know that it's not working, how will these changes be made? How will these changes, what kind of strategies have to be changed? And what effect will those actions have on whom, by when, and what will happen next? So these are very important questions when you apply the theory of change in your research concern, especially in program evaluation. Another question that you may be asking is, how will you know if change is happening? What will you see, and how will you measure that particular change that you are monitoring, you are looking for in your programs? How do you know that the dropout rates have finally decreased? How do you know that the reading skills of the student have improved? You have to have reliable, reliable measures to measure these changes. Now, the last part of this process is to come up with a methodology in collecting data for the theory of change research. You may be doing documentary analysis, observation, individual interviews, group interviews, or workshops. For data collection methods. To illustrate how the theory of change may be applied to research situations, especially in your educational context, in the educational set context, we'll try to examine an example of a project that is implemented by a certain school. And then we're going to discuss how that could be analyzed, that could be researched upon using the theory of change approach. Here is an example of a log frame. A log frame is basically a plan that is being used using the theory of change concept in an educational setting. So let's look at this particular log frame. Uh, so the log frame looks like this. You have the project summary, you have the goal, the outcome, the outputs, and the activities. And you have the indicators here in your column, the means of verification, the risk, and assumptions. The goal is to have a 10% increase in the number of grades 5 and 6 primary students continuing on to high school within 3 years. That's the goal of the program, 10% increase. Notice it's a very specific goal. It has a specific target. And the indicator would be the percentage of grades 5 and 6 primary students continuing on to high school. And the means of verification would be the comparison of primary and high school enrollment records. Notice that the goal from project summary to indicators and to means of verification have very, very specific targets and have a very, very logical way of verifying whether the targets are reached or not. Now, the next one is the outcome. The outcome is improved reading proficiency among children in grades 5 and 6 by 20% within 3 years. And the indicators is reading proficiency among children in grades 5 and 6. And the means of verification would be 6 monthly reading proficiency test using the National Assessment Tool. Then you have the risks and assumptions, which is that the improved reading proficiency provides self-confidence required to stay in school. That is the assumption of the outcome. Now, the outputs are the results of the activity. And so you have here two outputs. We have 500 grade 5 and 6 students with low reading proficiency complete a reading summer camp. And the indicator is the number of students completing a reading summer camp. The summer camp attendance records would be the means of verification, and the assumption is that children apply what they learned in the summer camp. Another output is 500 parents of children in grades 5 and 6 with low reading proficiency help their children read at home. And you have the indicator would be the number of parents helping their children to read at home. The means of verification is the survey of parents conducted at the end of each summer camp, and the assumption is that children are interested in reading with their parents. And these are the activities at the last part of the row are the activities. You have run 5 training summer camps, each with 100 grades, 5 and 6 students who have low reading proficiency, and distribute 500 reading at home kits to parents of children attending the summer camps. and the indicator will be the number of summer camps run, the number of kits distributed, and the means of verification will be the summer camp records and the kit distribution records. The assumption is that parents of children with low reading proficiency are interested in them attending the camps, and the parents are interested and able to use the kits at home. Notice that this is a very, very clearly laid out plan for a program that would improve the reading proficiency of the children. So, where does the theory of change come? The theory of change would come by examining whether the indicators that were set in the project, you can do a documentary analysis of the results of the program, looking at the reports or looking at the examination results. And you can also do a survey of what really happened of the program by, as running a survey with the parents, conducting focus group discussions, examining, meeting with the stakeholders and teachers. So you can actually do a lot of uh, focus group discussions or qualitative survey research. And the results of your survey or focus group discussion would try to examine whether these assumptions were correct, whether these assumptions were met in the project implementation. And based on the analysis of these assumptions, then you start looking whether the goal of the program was achieved, the outcomes were met, the desired outcomes were met, and if they are met or if they are not met, then you start to develop your own theoretical explanation. Basically, that's how you do a theory of change research. Now, let's try to examine an actual published paper using a theory of change. Here's a sample paper. The title of the paper is Using the Theory of Change to Enhance Peace Education Evaluation. Right? So this is written by Carolyn Aston. Right? So this article brings together concepts and practices from the fields of peace education, conflict resolution, and evaluation. It examines implementation and evaluation of selected peace education programs conducted by UNICEF to determine if theories of change can be identified and to consider how the theories of change may inform the design of the project. So you see, this is actual study. This is an actual study done using the theory of change concept. And so this is the overview of the program. The overview of the study is peace education theories of change included the following: peace education requires a pedagogical shift to more child-centered and shared leadership methods. Peace education permeates the system. So these are all the theoretical basis. And notice the different authors that they cited. They have Lederach, Ross, Shapiro, Church, and Rogers. So many references to discuss the reason or the theoretical basis of the study. And then they said that for the purposes of this research, the theory of change is defined as the implicit assumptions held by practitioners and participants about why the activities they chose for addressing a particular problem will work. And a theory of change also serves as a useful way of viewing the program assumptions. Remember, earlier I mentioned about assumptions. So you start looking at the assumptions of the programs, the processes used, and the expected outcomes. Exactly what I said earlier. That's how the theory of change is applied in research. You look at the assumptions, you look at the outcomes, and you look at whether the purpose or the goals of the programs are achieved. And these are the research problem of that particular research. Look at the problem. the research problems, questions, and the conceptual framework. Can stakeholders' heuristic chains that identify the underlying if-then assumptions of the programs be identified even though the stakeholders may not have known they were using a theory of change? Does peace education affect conflict behavior or change attitudes towards conflict among primary or secondary school students in a positive direction in the short term and in the long term? Does peace education change the attitudes of students toward cultural differences if the topic is included in a curriculum? So these are the questions that were asked in the research, again using the theory of change. And we look at the methods used by the researcher. And the method used is the research used inductive. So this time he did not use deductive. Remember earlier I mentioned about inductive approach to research. And so the research process used inductive one combining grounded theory from Strauss and Corbin and thematic networking by Rutherford Sterling. And the study assumed that peace education programs are theory driven, but that those theories may not be overt in the minds of the stakeholders and teachers who implement the program. And the three case sites were the foci, foci. And by the way, they pronounce foci, foci of analysis, or the focal point of the analysis. The individual statements from the interviewers with stakeholders and participants at the three sites were the units of the analysis used to bring to the surface implicit theories of change. A coding scheme was developed based on Rutherford Sterling's model that identifies basic themes to form organizing themes that result in a global theme. You see, this is a very, very good method of doing qualitative research. He has a coding system, he has a framework using the Rutherford Sterling model to look at how the theory of change work in a particular setup. And again, these are again more explanations about the methods that were used by the researcher. And so here, the research focused on the specific aspects of evaluation using the theory of change to design and strengthen the evaluation of peace education programs. So he has three case study sites. He did consultancies at each site. He did program evaluations. He looked at the processes. He started to have randomly selected portions of the data and develop a coding scheme. And after developing this coding scheme, he started to conduct interviews. So he also did interviews of the research. So he did interviews with the participants, okay, who spoke languages other than that, they were skill bilingual. So there were translators that were employed. There were interviews that were conducted, and he did. I don't know if he did a well. He did not do a focus group discussion. He just did uh, in-depth interviews in this research. And after that, he has his own findings. So this is upon after an intensive process, he was able to come up with his findings. You have teachers' preparation, facilitative pedagogy versus talk and chalk methods, effects of other training on implementation of peace education, and there is a need for regular reinforcement of methods. In terms of program content and student indicators, he noted improved skills, improve behaviors, and knowledge, especially understanding of human rights. In terms of implementation, the obstacles and challenges improve. These are the implementation obstacles and challenges, and the improved class management. For curriculum development, collaborative development process, the use of research-based curriculum. For non-student stakeholders, there's behavioral skill and attitudinal change among non-student population associated with peace education, and the levels of change for the school, family, and education. And he also talked about the context affecting peace education, like the violence, the economics, and cultural context. So there are some of his findings. And then he tried to relate his findings to the theoretical aspects. And what he noted is that the theory identified in the organizational theme student indicators strongly suggests that an outcome that might be expected will be a deeper, more complex understanding of conflict and its impact on self and others. At the evaluation sites, most students were able to provide broad definitions of conflict and peace that went well beyond fighting and absence of fighting. The students described these terms from a holistic perspective that included peace at all levels of society and referred to all types of conflict, including mental, emotional, physical, and structural conflicts. So you notice that he was able to come up with a theoretical explanation of the experience of giving peace education in this project. And then he was able to come up with a conclusion. His conclusion is that even as there are dozens of current intra and international conflicts occurring, the investment and intentionally evolving around nonviolent political change movements are encouraging. This type of change usually occurs only in small steps over long periods of time. So what he's saying is that that program has really contributed to developing new perspectives about peace in the schools where they are given, where there is peace education. And again, their further conclusion that he said, he mentioned that we must be able to make the argument for peace education's contribution to peace and conflict issues of the larger context in which it is taught. The theory of change can provide a lens through which we can help peace education programmers to develop realistic and measurable goals and objectives. We must become comfortable with a good enough contribution of peace education can make to a culture of peace while using evaluation result and theory to continue to strengthen the impact that peace education can have over the long run. And again, here's an example of a paradigm that uses the peace education conflicts. This is a paradigm that he was able to draw at the end of the research. You see, this is a theoretical explanation of a particular phenomena. The theory of change is a very effective approach for doing educational research. And I hope that in the future, some of you will be doing a dissertation, will write a dissertation using the theory of change. And I also hope that someday all programs implemented by the Department of Education, by Mindanao State Universities, and other agencies will use the theory of change as a methodology in improving their programs. After all, what's the purpose of research? Research is supposed to improve our lives. Research is to improve, seeks to improve society and make this world a better place to live in. That's all for today and I hope may natutunan kayo sa akin ngayon. Good day and God bless. Bye-bye. 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 Bye.